What's up, guys? Chimp here with another market update, and it's been a couple days since I recorded the last one. Not like the market has done much, though, fortunately, in the last few days. Um, so let's talk about everything, and then we'll go from there. So, first of all, let's just talk about Bitcoin. And for the most part, Bitcoin has been sort of sitting and rejecting below where it was trading in the prior range. So the prior range was like this, 116 to 120 zone. And Bitcoin's been essentially it broke down from that level and it's been trading below. And so obviously that's, in my opinion, leaning bearish. Um, and excuse me. So in my opinion, that's leaning bearish, and we'll see what happens. It's not like it's impossible to regain that level. I've seen it happen plenty of times where you sort of like quote unquote lose a level and then you regain it, and then the market goes from there. But clearly, like, what was going on when Bitcoin was sort of trading in this area is has significantly slowed, right? So I talked about it in plenty of videos, but I'll just bring it up again, which is ETF flows. And ETF flows were negative. Then you had a few couple like if you guys remember, like basically from June when we bottomed to like where we ended up pumping to, ETFs flowed in like another $10 billion worth of flows, and since then they've slowed down, and in fact we've started to see some outflows. And so relative to the peak, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to pinpoint the exact number, but we've outflowed maybe a billion or a bit more than a billion. So the ETFs have stopped buying for now. Now obviously, like, the ETFs can continue to buy. There's nothing that says that the ETFs have to stop buying or the ETFs are gonna not gonna go on another rampage. But for now, like, they've slowed down, and kind of similar to what happened in October to December. Like, you had this 2 month, maybe a bit over 2 month spurt where ETFs bought a bit, and then like it slowed down. Right, for the most part, like if you look, December 20th, the ETFs like slowed down, and then they were basically flat in terms of flows for about 4 months. And so again, like April 21st to about July, it's been about 3 months of inflows. Um, and it looks like they're going to go through another one of these slowdown phases. So to me, like, this is not a good sign. Another thing is, more importantly, is these treasuries, right? So Saylor came out, said he's not going to do any more ATMs on MSTR. Doesn't seem like he's too keen on issuing converts. Like, I think this week will show a lot because we'll be able to see if he's able to hit that STRC, like, I'm just going to call it stretch, the stretch preferred stock market, like hitting ATMs there. He already owes 500 mil a year in dividends. Now he could pause them, but I saw some articles saying like, oh, Saylor's going to issue $50 billion worth of stretch. Like, I don't think there's any sort of realistic possibility of that happening. Maybe he could issue a couple $1 billion worth, but again, like, to me, as he's issuing these, basically his like risk of implosion is going up because these are securities which I guess they're not technically like strict liabilities, but those dividends do accumulate. And so again, like, Sailor's not really buying. You have like the copycats like Metaplanet and some others like Saquons or whatever it's called. Like, they're slowing down clearly. So the treasury bit isn't there. And the reason I'm spending a lot of time on this is because, like, this is where the big money comes in, right? It's not your average retail Joe who's swinging 10 BTC positions on BYBIT or whatever. Like, it's, these are where the actual flows and money is coming from. So the treasuries flows have slowed down. Now that doesn't mean they have to sell, right? And so that's like Bitcoin they've absorbed out of the market. And so that's a consideration, right? Like, they absorb this crypto out of the market. They might sell at some point, but they're under no obligation to sell, especially Sailor. And so I guess you could say that's bullish in the sense of there's not much more like, the coins are out of circulation for now, but it's bearish in the sense that those buy flows are now like going to stop, right? And so like, in terms of like future buy flows to look forward to, it's basically the ETF. Now, I think the ETF flows are definitely correlated to stocks. I'm just gonna pull up the Qs. Um, for now, stocks have been chopping, but they've been going up, right? But we saw what happened when stocks sneezed, right? Like when stocks had a sneeze, Bitcoin broke down from its range. Like stocks have recovered most of the sell off, and Bitcoin's still trading at 114, 115, 116, like nothing too special. And so to me, I think like the ETF flows will probably be pretty correlated to stocks, but we've had some strong stock days and the ETF flows haven't been correspondingly strong. And so again, like I think that provides a level of fragility that if stocks go down for some reason, you're probably going to see a lot of outflows. If stocks go up, like maybe you see some inflows. Okay, leverage in a market. So let's look at open interest. So this is actually a good sign. If you're bullish, I think it's fair to say the most degenerate of apes have been wiped from this market. Um, open interest peaked, and I talked about this a lot. Like I don't like when open interest was at 100, 105 billion. I was like sounding the alarm. Like, look, this is like really, something to be worried about. There's a lot of leverage in the market. Alts have been up only. That number has reset, right? It's about 87.4 billion. Now, it is still 15 billion, dollars more, and there's some normalization here, and unit bias and units have gone up in the market, but from the peak, it's definitely come down a lot. Like we've clearly taken out a lot of the highest leverage players. In terms of like where we sit, and I wonder if I can zoom out on this a little bit. It's still like elevated, right? And actually, like when you look at the open interest, actually, it's just Bitcoin. Let me see if the global will load. Let me kill the Bitcoin one. Yeah, let's give this a minute. So like, global open interest basically peaked twice in the summer, and like yeah, it started to trend down. Like if you look at a peak, it was 91, and I could have made videos at 70 and told you like, hey, like it's reset, right? But essentially every time global open interest repumped, like that was probably a good time to short Bitcoin. And so like when it pumped 10 billion here, you got a nice short. When it pumped again here, right? Like if I just highlight, you got another nice short. And like it reset again, right? Like this was the second sort of like mega altcoin flush. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a lot of alts that like basically just totally collapsed on the secondary leg lower. And so that open interest reset, right? And like you could have looked at it and said, look, it was at 90, now it's at 60. And then you sort of started this slow bleed and like you ended up losing this level, which was like probably more so like the Bitcoin believers sort of capitulating once like the stock market started to get a little bit shaky. And then like, yeah, open interest like basically got cut in half and the market basically bottomed. So I think like when you zoom out, clearly we've taken out the highest leverage people. I still think there's a lot of leverage in this market. And so that does concern me. And so I want to show you guys a couple liquidation heat maps on Hyperliquid here. One is on Bitcoin. So like clearly and it would have been better to look at this yesterday because you had like two like apes who are short Bitcoin, and I think both of them have basically been carried out. But look, you still have like some degenerates, right? Like so you have these big candles, like you have one guy who's short and he'll get popped for like a couple hundred Bitcoin if it goes to 116 or whatever. You have this mega ape that's long, he'll be liquidated for like 1,000 Bitcoin if we drop below 113.5. But like ignore these big candles. You look at like all the positioning, right? For the most part, not many shorts to liquidate up to 120. Maybe you have a random short to liquidate, not that much, like 400 Bitcoin is really not that much. Like for the most part, not that many shorts to liquidate, right? On the long side, it's like all of these positions all the way up to like 105, 104, 103 that are susceptible to getting hunted. And so again, that to me is a little bit scary. I want to show this on ETH. Again, I've been a big proponent of not shorting ETH. People have asked me, like, should I short ETH? I've repeatedly said, do not short ETH. You do have this mega ape that's short ETH, short 70,000 ETH. His liquidation's around like 37.10. But again, like same story, right? Like on ETH even, a lot of these positions are longs that sort of get liquidated all the way down. On the short side, maybe have some random ape, but for the most part, not really. let me pull up something like a fart coin also, just because I want to show it. I don't know if I showed this. I mean, I showed this in one of my videos. I don't remember if it's the last one. Again, very similar. Like, you do have one ape on fart coin that's short with a lick at 166. But again, like, in terms of like distribution, and by the way, like, you could look at the long side, like, there's 88 million units on that side. There's 25 million units, even when you account for this guy. You know, even if you go like way up, it's like 40 or 50 million. So like you have a ton of these positions, and my gut feeling here is we sort of took out the highest leverage apes, but at minimum you have something like this that's in the horizon, which is at some point like these apes that have bought the dip on alts or are sort of lower leverage, like they weren't, you know, the giga degenerate apes are going to get carried out of this market as well. Okay, so what's my best case and worst case and realistic case scenario for Bitcoin? So I would say like if ETF flows can pick up again, if treasuries have absorbed for the most part, I could see a scenario where, like, I would say best case scenario, maybe this thing chops up. There's not really that much demand because treasuries have slowed, but ETFs are, you know, stock market's going straight up. ETF demand is sort of coming back in. Maybe Bitcoin can go up like 10 or 15% here, 20%. I don't know, like 20% even seems like far-fetched. And maybe you have some flushes on the way, which takes out these alt positions again. Realistic scenario. Still think this thing is leaning bearish. Like, I think we end up going lower ultimately. I don't know what path that takes, but I think we go lower. And that's what I'm still banking on because, again, like, I don't know who the buy side is. Like, if Sailor's not buying, if all these people aren't buying, like, who are we hoping buys Bitcoin here? You know, I really don't know. And let me just lastly talk about alts. I think certain alts are just dead. It's pretty clear. Like, some of these alts have just topped. Like, for example, Bonk. You know, I don't expect a Bonk to go back to 0.0, like, let's just call it 4 or 38. Like, I'm going to exclude all the decimals and all the zeros. Like, it's at 24. Like, you know, if you're a Bonkable even, like, maybe you get something like this. But I think ultimately this thing, like, probably trades lower. But on the flip side, like, I think you can still have some runners. For example, Pump. Maybe Pump keeps going, right? Like, these guys have a war chest. Maybe it keeps going, right? So maybe this thing ends up actually running a bit. So I guess on the alt side, I think the breadth of the rally is over. You could have certain runners. You can even have certain coins make new all-time highs. But yeah, for the most part, I think alts are pretty cooked. So yeah, I guess to summarize, you've taken out the most leveraged apes. I'm not sure who the buy side's going to be, but I'm leaning bearish. And ultimately, we'll see what happens. Like, I'm going to keep an eye on the data and what I observe and go from there. I suspect you're going to need like a big red day in stocks for Bitcoin to take another leg lower and break this 112 region. But again, we'll see. I will say, like, the one positive sign I'll give bulls when it comes to Bitcoin is I've seen a lot of these accounts sort of capitulate on Twitter that were like perma bullish, like, you know, so we'll see what happens. Again, I still lean down, but I don't think the short is as easy as it was at 120. And ultimately, we'll see what happens. So anyways, guys, take care. Until next time.